Dear students, let us start the discussion on today's newspaper. The first article, India's choices as America as. You all know that India-US relations have reached to new heights during President Bush and President Obama era. Now, under the President Trump era, diplomatic relations are becoming more transactional. It is not only the case with India, it is also the case with the European Union and all other major partners of the United States of America. From the days of his election, he has clearly stated that all the allies of United States have to take their share of burden with regard to defense expenditure. So in this context, he has clearly stated the European partners that 2% of their GDP has to be contributed to the NATO's expenditure. And also, there is a transactional relationship which was clearly visible with China as Mr. Xi Jinping has met Mr. Trump. The rhetoric of Mr. Trump against China as a currency manipulator has come down. So probably there might be some transactional deal stuck in reference to the North Korea out there. So that way, the Trump is today silent on one China policy and is also silent on currency manipulation of China. In this, let's come to India. So when Prime Minister Modi meets Mr. Trump, the first question he is going to ask is what India can offer to United States of America. So in this context, the various things which can be put forward are how India can help on the issue of Afghanistan and also how the defense trade can be made more pragmatic, especially by strengthening the foundational agreements related to defense. So with regard to Afghanistan, United States is expecting a greater role for India. The same United States did not expect India to participate believing that it may arrogate or may displease the Pakistan before. But today US is seeing Indian boots to be on the Afghanistan soil. It means Indian army has to be deployed over there. If it is not possible, US is open to supply of military hardware or servicing of this hardware or training of the military personnel of the Afghanistan. So, to what extent India is ready is the question on this. And the second is, India and US have signed one of the foundational agreement, that is Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement. There are two other, the Communication Interoperability Security Memorandum of Agreement and Basic Exchange Cooperation Agreement where geospatial data is being shared between the countries. So, Indian Army has certain objections to this. So, President Trump may stress or push India for this. Then only the defense trade can deepen between these two countries. And added to that, the Make in India, which the Prime Minister Modi is talking about, and America First, which Mr. Trump is talking about, they may come in conflict with each other as the defense trade strengthens between the countries. And the protectionist attitude of Mr. Trump, especially in relation to the H-1B visas and movement of the natural persons, is also affecting the Indian IT industry. So, what is the way forward for India in these circumstances? India has to move forward purely based on its own self-interest, rather than tying itself to the American tune. The reason is, America changes its tune to its convenience and based on its own cost-benefit analysis. So, India shall be careful with regard to finding its way forward on these matters. Now, generic medicines in a digital age. You all know that a patent drug and a bioequivalent drug of this patented drug is called as a generic drug. So, the generic drugs can only be manufactured once the patent gets expired. Before they are being manufactured, their potency has to be equated with the original drug. These tests are called as bioequivalence tests. And this bioequivalence is not being properly established and the norms are not very stringent for the generic drugs in India. So, one way the government is encouraging the use of generic drugs and on the other way there are no quality standards for the same or there is no proper testing standards for the same. It may lead to spurious drugs or low quality drugs. So, in government's procurement to the armed forces, etc., to an extent, sometimes to the tune of 30% of the drugs are not being stated as qualitative. So, that is the reason why we need to bring in stringent bioequivalence norms, at least self-certification from the drug companies. The best way forward is keeping all the test data related to the generic drugs in the public domain so that people can search for that particular drug and its potency, bioequivalence, etc., and they can make a choice. Obviously, as the market is going to determine which is better than what, then citizens will be better placed to make the decisions. And it can also help the companies to improvise their standards. That is what this article stresses on. The next is no full stops. You know that the Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, and Nepal BBIN, it has been proposed for a motor vehicle agreement. In the 2014 SARC in Nepal, Pakistan did not want to be a participant to motor vehicle agreement. And Afghanistan wanted to be a participant, but without Pakistan being a participant, it is not possible. So later, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani also tried to push it with Pakistan, and Pakistan is not willing for. And then these four countries of the SAARC have moved forward, and Sri Lanka and Maldives, there is a maritime boundary. So in this context, Bhutan, the latest, it has moved out from the motor vehicle agreement due to internal opposition from the people. What is the reason? The vehicular pollution may cause environmental degradation, and Bhutan is one country which takes pride in its environmental consciousness. And the second is, the Bhutan, it also has been, you know that gross happiness index of the Bhutan in this context. But today, connectivity is a new global currency for growth and economic wealth creation. So, tomorrow the attitude of the Bhutan may change, but for time being, it is not. So, that's why the connectivity will reduce the emissions by and large, as the distance that has to be traveled is going to come down. So that reasoning has to be explained to the Bhutan. And also the second thing is, alternative ways, that is waterways, etc., also need to be explored. And another thing which we are talking about, the region connectivity, Asia Highway Network, that is Bangladesh, India, China, Myanmar, BCIM corridor. Though India is not part of a One Belt, One Road initiative officially, so these connectivity choices are also being explored by India at a later date. For us, the carry-home point is simply this. Connectivity is the new currency for growth and prosperity in the region, and how this connectivity can be maximized, India has to keep its options open. And facing up to IT. You know that IT industry in India is facing many challenges. The challenges are majorly due to protectionism that is coming up in the Western world. So IT industry is majorly based on export markets in the developed countries. So United States is the largest market, followed by Europe and then Australia and these Asian countries. But today, US has given restrictions on H-1B visas, and then followed by Australia and also UK and now Singapore. So because of this, the natural movement of the people gets restricted. However, there is a ray of hope, because all these are being done through the executive orders. The legislature or the laws are not being put in place. And second is, the IT industry in those countries, can it survive without support from India? That is what is the second question. So Indian IT industry has led to the creation of wealth in those respective countries, and sooner or later the country is expected to revive this, understand the same. So in the meanwhile, these global countries are talking about the WTO facilitation. You know that in WTO, the natural movement of the persons are more seen from a security dimension rather than from a trade dimension. So India has to work towards a pact on the trade in services, which also involves the natural movement of persons. This India needs to take forward. Now let's get into the news page, because today OpenEd is not there. Security cost row hits Udan's flight. So it is nothing but interdepartmental coordination. You can cite it as an example. As new airports are coming under Udan, who has to bear the expenditure for the security cover? Home Ministry, or Ministry of Aviation, or Ministry of Finance? Home Ministry, it wants the Ministry of Aviation to take up. Ministry of Aviation says security is a sovereign function. So obviously it has to be spent from the Consolidated Fund of India. But one thing which we need to understand is, the airports across the world are managed through one single force. They are not being managed individually. An integrated management is necessary. So in this context, if you take US, so the TSA, Transport Security Authority, has been established after 9/11 attacks. Before that, it was fragmented. So later, 9 by 11 attacks later, they have created TSA, which is an integrated authority, and the security at the airports have increased. So this is what India has to take it as an example. Now, Cyprus President Mr. Nikos, he has visited India, and there is no much important over there. So Turkey, which is a natural friend of Pakistan, it is coming close to India. So Mr. Turkey's President Erdogan is expected to visit India, and it is looking for defense space ties with India. So that is what is this article talks about. And then money laundering may be made a criminal offense. It is already a criminal offense. It's wrongly been headed like this. But money laundering is to be investigated by primary agencies as of now. The investigative power, irrespective of the primary agencies, it will be transferred to the Enforcement Directorate so that there will be quick disposal of cases. That's what has been talking about. Don't think that money laundering is equivalent to black money. The money laundering, laundered money is a clean money. Laundering means cleaning the things. So money generated through drug trafficking or terrorism, it has been laundered, cleaned through one or the other ways. So this money laundering, this is a tax-paid money, but the source of money itself is wrong. That is either terrorism or this drug trafficking. This is what we talk about. Give women their space, says the Supreme Court. Eve teasing is creating fear, and also it is violating the liberty, freedoms and equality of the women. That is what is the Supreme Court says. It's a psychological assault on the woman, which is violating the Article 14 of equality. And then Supreme Court offers to set the stage for peace talks in Kashmir. But government has clearly stated that unless the separatists aim to talk within the framework of the constitution, it cannot conduct a dialogue with them. That is what is the center stand. And education is empowerment. That is what is the Supreme Court stated. Unless the students get back to their schools and colleges and stop throwing the stones, the dialogue cannot move forward. And coming to train tickets on demand by 2020. Railway Minister Suresh Prabhu, what he says is this. In India, the track density did not increase in proportion to the increase in the passenger volume and the freight volume. So the dedicated freight corridor comes up, and once the plans of doubling the tracks gets into shape, we can go to the train tickets on demand by 2020. So the existing projects are expected to be completed by 2020. Now let's come to major Korea conflict possible. The first biggest diplomatic challenge before President Trump is related to Korea. And let us see how this particular problem is going to be solved by him. So here, North Korea has missile power and the nuclear power. It may not be able to hit the United States as of now, but it can definitely hit Europe, and also it can hit South Korea and Japan. So which are the allies of the United States of America? And then, if you come to the business page, mal-privatizing PSBs, Acharya. So you know that public sector banks are suffering from financial indiscipline and growing in non-performance assets. Then RBI Deputy Governor Mr. Acharya, what he says is, to bring in discipline, even privatization of the public sector banks have to be considered. So the next article is, profit is not a bad word, unfair enrichment is. This is what Jaitley talks about. It is in the context of GST anti-profiteering clause. According to this, once the GST rates are been determined, whatever the gap, or if the GST rates have been decreased, the benefit need to be transferred to the customer rather than the companies unduly getting benefited from the difference in tax rates. That's what has been stated. And then coming to the India's position, and there is a hope among the Indian industry, that is, India's economic sentiment is positive, so that private investments can be expected to grow in the coming year, which can boost the India's growth. Now let's come to the revision. The first article, you know that India's choices as America asks. So the major questions India is going to face from American president are the role it can play in Afghanistan with regard to defense foundation agreements. Then India has to choose its options based on its own priorities rather than the United States. The next is facing up to IT. This is about the challenges IT is facing due to protectionism. So the Indian IT industry is more export oriented, As protectionism is increasing in the developed first world, it is posing a challenge to the Indian IT industry, which is up to $100 billion exports it contributes to Indian economy. And the next is generic medicines in a digital age. The quality of generic medicines, these need to be enhanced. So the bioequivalence studies have to be made compulsory, and the data related to these studies shall be made available to the customers. And Bhutan pulled out from multi-vehicular agreement. You know that connectivity is wealth, connectivity is new currency. So India has to work on bringing in connectivity in the subcontinent. And coming to the notes, the Supreme Court, that is with regard to the news, train tickets on demand by 2020. Supreme Court wants to talk about peace talks in Kashmir. And then the Udan flights, they are going through the security row. And money laundering may be made as an investigative thing by the Enforcement Directorate. Women shall be given their free space. These are the things which we have discussed. And thank you very much and all the best.